If life is out of balance, could the issue be deeper than your schedule? Could it be that everything actually begins with your faith? Good day, family. This is video number 4 in our series, Getting Life Back in Balance. Today's lesson is titled, The Missing Ingredient in a Balanced Life. Let's transition into the subject of faith. As we move from foundation into the heart of this series, we now focus on where balance truly begins. Not with time, not with structure, not with effort. Balance begins with faith, because faith determines how everything else in life is ordered. Now let me give you some Bible for this. The book of Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1 says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. That's Hebrews 11 and verse 6. Now that's just not about salvation. It is about how we live. Faith is not something we add to life. It is what shapes how life is lived. Proverbs 3, you've heard me mention this before, calls us to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and lean not to our own understanding. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. Now that kind of trust is what brings direction, and direction is what creates alignment. Now why is this complicated? Why is this hard in real life? Well, many people have faith, but it's not always examined or active. Faith can become assumed rather than practiced. Faith can become acknowledged rather than applied. Faith can become present but not leading. And when faith is not leading, something else is. That is where imbalance begins. Because life starts being shaped more by pressure, responsibility, emotion, or circumstance, rather than trusting in God. Now here's our core truth for this lesson. A life that is not led by faith will always be shaped by something else, and that leads to imbalance. Faith is not optional for balance. It is foundational. Now let's consider faith as a daily influence. Paul says it this way, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 7, we walk by faith and not by sight. Now that is not occasional, that is daily. Faith affects how we make decisions. Faith affects how we respond to pressure. Faith influences how we prioritize what matters. When faith is active, life becomes more aligned, even when it is still full. Now, why does all of this matter? I'll tell you why. Faith sustains balance over time, because life will not slow down on its own. Pressure will not remove itself. Responsibility will not disappear, but faith allows you to move through life with clarity and stability. Hebrews 11 repeatedly shows men and women who lived by faith, not because life was easy, but because faith anchored them through difficulty. Balance is sustained by what you trust. By way of application, reflect on how your faith is functioning. Is your faith leading your life or simply part of it? Do your decisions reflect trust in God or just reaction to circumstances? Have you assumed faith instead of actively living in it? Balance begins where faith becomes active. And this is one of the reasons I focused on connecting everyday life with spiritual discipline. Because faith is not meant to stay in one area. It is meant to shape all of our life. I wrote a book called Footlocker of Faith. And that book shows how God uses the everyday experiences of life to strengthen our faith. I'll leave a link of that in the description below. In our next lesson, we'll look at what happens when faith is not first and how that affects every area of life. And this is what it means to be formed to fight. Thank you so much for spending time with me.